Hello and welcome to all participants from around the world. My name is Arya Peruma and welcome back to today's Java programming session. So today we'll actually be continuing where we left off last time regarding Java programming, and what we'll be doing today is we'll just be building on those concepts and skills we learned last time even further. So the topic that we're going to be looking at today for Java programming is data and methods. And we're going to really be learning how we can use this idea of data and methods to our advantage when programming in Java, and how we can actually implement these in our code as well. In addition, if anyone had any questions throughout this webinar, please feel free to put them in the chat and I'll definitely address those. So with this, let's get started with today's Java programming session. So as I mentioned previously, what we're going to be learning today is data and methods. So basically, data is specific information about an object in code, and methods are kind of actions performed by that object. So it's really important to recognize, not only in Java programming, but programming in general, all of them have really big real life applications. So even with programming, although we are doing programming on a computer, all of these steps we take in programming and all these ideas we implement actually have big correlations to real life as well. So this is no different than the idea of data and methods, because even real life objects in real life have this idea of data and methods, and this concept implemented into them. So I've given an example over here. So one example is an iPhone. So let's take an iPhone to kind of solidify this concept and help everyone understand what this means better. So essentially, if we have an iPhone, there are many different aspects of data and methods which are used to kind of describe this iPhone. So data, as I mentioned previously, is information about the object. So let's take the object as an iPhone. So we can describe it with many things. So we can describe it as a model. The model could be X. Screen size could be 5.8. The storage in gigabytes could be 32. And then headphone jack, no. So basically, these are characteristics of the iPhone. So model, screen size, storage, headphone jack, characteristics of the iPhone. And basically, for each characteristic, there's specific information regarding the object. And similarly, there are methods as well. If you look on the right at this blue section, essentially there are different things the iPhone can do, the different actions the iPhone can implement. So this can include making a call, sending SMS, playing music, or even browsing the internet. So essentially, these are the methods which an iPhone can perform, and basically actions which the iPhone can perform as well. So this is just an example of how data and methods is used in the concept and idea of it. So although I did give an example with an iPhone, essentially the concept is the exact same whether you do any object and you program around any object in Java. Essentially, you have information about an object, and then you have actions which the object can perform. So essentially, we know that there are various sets of data and methods for various objects in programming. However, a lot of these data sets are kind of hard to manage. And what I mean by this is a lot of the times we can have a lot of data to be stored and a lot of data to actually collect regarding an object. So in order to actually collect this data efficiently, quickly, and also in an organized manner for our code, we have to be utilizing something called variables. And variables are actually something that add meaning to this data. So if I go back here to our previous slide over here, as you can see, the model of the iPhone is X. And essentially, all that happens here is, since the model was X, you can give it a variable name of iPhone model, which accurately describes the actual model type. So this is applicable for anything. So you can have a variable called fruit and put a strawberry as our set of data. So essentially, all variables are is they're just ways to add meaning to our data and describe our data. So we as programmers know what kind of data we're talking about when implementing our code and programming. So essentially, there are various rules to create variables, which I'll touch on to now. And throughout this session, I'll also be going on and showing you how we can actually code this in real life as well to help everyone get a deeper understanding. So essentially, there are many rules and many things that you need to keep in mind when you create variables. So on the right over here, I have an example of a sample variable. So this on the right, as you can see, it says int variable name with a semicolon at the end. And that's just kind of the convention for creating a variable. So you have this int over here is a data type, which I'll be getting into further today what that is so we can actually grasp a deeper understanding. And then after the int, you have something and it says variable name. So basically, that's exactly what I described before. So as you can see, iPhone model would be the variable name. And here I've just put variable name to describe what we could put our variable name as. So you can make your variable name named anything depending on the kind of data you want to transfer and implement in your code. And then just the standard rule of thumb for creating a variable is just putting a semicolon at the end, which I'll also show everyone how that works on the editor as well. So essentially, as I mentioned previously, there are also many rules and regulations when actually being able to create a good variable. So for this image on the right, the variable is of type integer, but you can also have many other data types as well, which I'll be going over. And the variable name must start with either a letter, a underscore, or a dollar sign. So this is just a rule that Java has and a rule that you must follow when putting or making variable names. So as you can see, I've just named this variable name, and it starts with a letter. So I could have also started it with a dash, or I could have started it with a dollar sign. And basically, that's just a rule you need to follow when naming a variable. Your variable cannot have any spaces. So as you can see, I've just put variable name, and although variable and name are two separate words, as you see, I've just put variable and I've uppercased the N on name, but I haven't put any spaces in. It's just one variable name. That's also another rule you must follow when creating variables in Java, because of the fact that you do definitely need that to be all in one kind of word. You don't want any spaces. And in order to actually be able to differentiate between words, because we do know that variable and name are two separate words, I've made this a capital N, and that's something called camel case. And basically, that's when you have more than one word, but you can't put any spaces. So what you have to do is the first letter is lowercase, and then the other words following that first word, the first letter of those will be uppercase, as you can see over here. And in addition, you can't use Java keywords to name variables. So we'll get more into what a Java keyword is, but as you can already see, there are things that those are kind of default things that Java already has built into its library. So just default characteristics of Java. That can include things like int, string, class. So those are default words which Java already has in its library. So when creating a variable name, you can't use those keywords to name the variables. And we'll also be going over some examples of naming variables and what naming variables actually looks like later on. So don't worry if you would like some more clarification on that. So although we have addressed how we can actually write variables and create an effective and efficient variable name for our code, we haven't really talked about the kind of main use of them, and that's basically for saving values. So, as I mentioned previously, variables are just used to save sets of data, and that's basically the main focus of a variable. That's the reason why we use variables not only in Java, but almost every programming language, if not all of them. So essentially, we need to be able to save data in our variables. So over here, I have a example of a variable, and it's just called int variable name equals 24 with a semicolon. So basically, what's happening here is there are many components and characteristics we need to be looking out for when naming variables. So over here, we have int, and that is what is called a data type. So a data type is basically the kind of types your variable can be. So an int just stands for integer, which is an integer value. So just as in math, an integer value can be a negative or positive whole number. That's the exact same idea here. An integer is just that. So basically, when naming our variables and when having a variable, the variable has to be an integer. As you can see, the variable is an integer. It is 24. In addition, after the data type, you have the actual variable name. So obviously, you want to name your variable something that makes sense to your data. So obviously, variable name would not be the best variable name to choose, but this is just an example. So for this specific one, you would choose a variable name like number because what you're doing is you're defining a number, which is 24. So if you had int number equals 24, that would be better for knowing what kind of data we are describing, which is really useful for us as programmers because whenever we go back and look at our code, say we've written 1,000 lines of code, we want to go back and look at something after a year or something like that, a long period of time. If we go back and we actually look at this int variable name equals 24, we might not actually know what we're describing. We might not know what variable name is supposed to represent. So that's why you want to make sure to choose efficient and proper and understandable variable names for your data. And essentially, after that, we have an equal sign. So um, an equal sign when naming variables is not exactly what you may think. It's not exactly this is equal to that, but it's more of what is called an assignment operator. So all that's happening here is we're just assigning this variable name to the value 24. We're just saying that there is a correlation between these two, and this is not exactly equal to 24. It's not the same value, but rather it's an assignment. It's basically saying that there is some relation between these. And then finally, last but not least, we have our value. So our value in this case is an integer because I put a data type as int over here. But since it is an integer, I put a value of 24 over here because 24 is an integer. So we always need a value. We always want to assign our variable to a specific value. In this case, I've chosen a number 24. So this is exactly the structure of a variable and how we can save the value, and we can actually assign some proper data to um, our proper data to our variables. Okay, so now we're actually going to get into what I was talking about a lot earlier, and this is the idea of data types. So essentially, when we look at data types, in Java programming, especially in Java rather than any other language, there are um, many rules and regulations we need to follow surrounding data types because Java is very specific to what you're writing. So it's really case sensitive. And if you don't do exactly what it wants, your code will not run. Although your structure may be correct, you need to make sure to follow the same syntaxes and just overall punctuation that you need in Java. So these are what we call data types. So as you can see, if you look below over here, it says int variable name. And we actually did just previously look at, if you go back over here, int, we looked at that just now. And we just did look at um, the int data type, which saves an integer value in a variable. But along with that, as I mentioned, there are many more um, many more data types as well. And I've included a few over here, which we're definitely going to be going over today. I'll also explain what each of these mean and kind of the cruciality behind them and what you can use them for. So first, let's start with this one. So this one says char variable name equals, and then in single quotes, it says a, and then that semicolon. So basically, char basically saves a single character in a variable. So a single character means just one letter. It can't be any more than a letter. It has to be one letter. It can only be um, just one singular entity, because of the fact that that's just how much the data type will hold. So if you're using char, and then you're assigning it to a variable name, you can only give it a letter. So basically, char will store a character in a variable. Next, over here on the right of char, we have string. So basically, there is correlation between string and char. However, I'll explain the difference right now. So basically, string can save multiple characters in a variable. So on the left, you have char, which can only save one character, but on the right, you have string, and you can save as many characters as you want. So you can do a bunch of like list of values, list of alphabets, and you can just type those in double quotation marks, and you can save those to your variable. And basically, that's why many programmers do prefer to use string more, because there aren't very many cases where you can actually effectively be able to be able to use these strings and character types, because of the fact that character data types actually do require only one kind of letter, and essentially because of that, what actually happens is there aren't many cases where you can use just one letter in your programming. So that's why many people do opt for string. So what this means is, as I mentioned previously, a bunch of letters that you can use. And basically, when using these bunch of letters, what you need to do is you need to follow the rule that Java sets for you, and you have to put double quotation marks around the set of letters. And then what you have to do is you just basically write string in capital S, so string, your variable name, and you have to do the assignment operator is equal to whatever you want to put in there. It can be whatever you want and whatever depends on your code. So that's what string will do. So character will save one alphabet, but string can save multiple. That's why string is more of the data type many opt for. However, if you do have a case that you only need one kind of letter, then you would opt for char. So after we actually establish this, we can move down to this one over here, and it says double sum name is equal to 2.34, and then semicolon. So basically, this is a data type called double, and double essentially saves a decimal value in a variable. So opposed to int, which can only save whole number values, whether it be negative or positive, it can't save decimal values. And that's where we can bring double in, because there are definitely going to be many cases in Java programming and in your programming that you will need decimal values in your code. And that's why double is so important and really good to know, because that's the only way you can actually incorporate these decimal numbers and save decimal numbers to your variables. And then over here we have booleans, and basically it says boolean variable name is equal to false with, of course, that semicolon. And just to reiterate, the semicolon is very important because that's how you would actually name your data type. And essentially, that's just kind of, once again, those rules that Java sets, and just rules that have to apply to Java no matter what you're doing. So just remember to always put a semicolon when actually initializing your variables. So essentially, as I was previously mentioning, we have Boolean variable names equal to false. And basically what Boolean does is it saves a true or false value in a variable. And essentially, this is only applicable if you have something that you want to say true or false for. So for the example we're going to be doing right now after this, we're going to be doing something where we can actually save test values using data types and variables, and we can kind of call and implement and store test scores for a student. So essentially, when we look at that example of test scores, there's this idea of pass or fail. So do you fail the test or do you pass the test? So basically, if you want to kind of look at that, that's where Boolean would come in because it'll say true or false. It's basically a variable which can store true or false, and you can say pass or fail. So just one or the other. Is it true or is it false? That's what Boolean is used for, and that's why it's a really useful data type if you want to denote that. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, the integer, which we already did look at, and that just saves an integer value in a variable. So double will do decimal, and integer will only do whole number. It can be negative or positive. And also double can also be negative as well. It's just that double will store negative decimal numbers along with positive decimal numbers. So now that we've actually kind of got a deep understanding of data types and kind of how we can implement variables into our code, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to be showing everyone an example in real life coding. So hopefully everyone can see my screen right now and everyone can see the editor and where we can actually type our code. So as I mentioned previously, the example which we're going to be doing today is kind of a example where we can look at a student's test scores and we can just collect data regarding those test scores and just store them in variables and then also just implement and call that data. So what we're going to do is, I'm just going to comment over here. So what we're going to do is collect a student's test scores. And basically, what we're going to do now is we're just going to use these data types and we're just going to do this together. We're going to use the data types and we're just going to collect the data for test scores. So essentially, the first thing we need to know is let's go ahead and I'm just going to go back over here so everybody can just get a quick refresher of the data types which we talked about. So let's go into, so basically we have these ones over here. And basically we have things like char, string, double, boolean, and int, which are the data types we did discuss today. So let's go through these one by one and implement them in code. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use char. So what I'm going to do is we're going to collect a student's test scores. So first of all, in order to collect a student's test scores, we need the student's name. So before actually writing the student's name, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use char, which is remember, which is a data type, and that will store one alphabet value. So just one alphabet or one letter. So basically, if we say char, I'm going to name the variable first initial. And then I'm just going to say the first initials equal to, and then in single quotes, because that's the thing for initializing a char variable, you need single quotes. And in the single quotes, I'm just going to write H. I'm going to just say that's the first initial, and then the semicolon. So basically what I've done here is I've stored the data for the student's first initial using a char data type. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to not just repeat this process by using all the other four data types we learned about. So remember, we use string, we learned about string, we learned about int, we learned about double, and we learned about Boolean. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to use string. So we're going to say string, and we want the student's name now. So we want, I'm going to name it student name. And we're going to say student name is equal to, and in order to initialize a string, we need double quotes. And I'm just going to make up a random student name. So let's think of a student name that starts with H. So let's say um, Holmes, and let's just say the last name is Sherlock. Okay, so we're just going to and then put the semicolon at the end. So basically, I've just named the student now, and I've stored it in a string type variable. So basically, what I've done is just said string student name is equal to home Sherlock, and I've just basically just stored that. And now let's go ahead and do an int variable type now. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to now use the int data type to think of the student's grade, because student's grade would be an integer value because it's a whole number value. So let's say int grade, that's what I'm going to name the variable, int grade is equal to, and let's say that's equal to 10. And then we're going to just put this at the end. So we have int grade is equal to 10. We have the string student name is equal to home Sherlock. And then we have char first initial is equal to H. So essentially, now we're just going to be looking at our last two data types, which we covered. So that is double and Boolean. So now in order to actually get our real test scores, we're going to now use a double. So um, double score is equal to, I'm going to name the variable score. So double score is equal to, and let's just come up with a random score that's a double. So double, once again, means a decimal value, just to clarify. And basically, let's just think of a decimal percentage for our student's score. So let's say the student score is 80.2, and then semicolon. So now we have four. We have char, first initial. We've kind of collected the data for the first initial of our student, which is H. We have the string data type for collecting the student's name, which is home Sherlock, which we've just named. We have int, and then grade, and we're going to make that equal to 10 because we're going to say the grade is 10. And then finally, we have double score is equal to 80.2. So now finally, we're going to be looking at Boolean. So we have Boolean, and we want to know if our student passed or failed. So Boolean pass is equal to, and since we did set the score as 80.2, let's say if you get 50 or above, it's a pass. So we set our score to 80.2, so our student did pass. So we're going to say Boolean pass is equal to true, and then that's semicolon. So if I go back here, as you can see, we've covered all of our data types, and essentially all we did is we just easily collected the data. We just kind of defined it ourselves, and we said that char, we wanted the char to represent the first initial, we wanted string to represent the student's name, we wanted a double to represent just our score, we wanted Boolean to represent whether our student passed or failed, and we wanted int to represent the grade. So in order to actually do that, we just came up with our own variable names, and we came up with the data we wanted to store in our variables. And that's all essentially we do when it comes to just basically being able to use data types with variables. So as you can see, we have actually made sure to instantiate all of these. And now what we can do is we can actually do something called printing our variables. So in our last Java session, we actually learned how to print variables, and we learned how to kind of effectively use methods to not only print values, but also just to make our code more efficient. So essentially, now we're just going to be looking at that same exact idea here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use our print statements. If we don't remember our print statements, the print statements is system dot out dot print ln, and then inside that we just have some random values, a random message, and then we have a semicolon at the end. So essentially, we're just going to now try to actually print our variables. So we have a variable char of first initial over here. So let's actually try to print that. So first initial. And now let's save it and let's see what happens. So I'm going to go over and run this. And as you can see, when I printed it, it actually says H. So if I go back here, as you can see, we actually initialized our variable char to h. And essentially what we did, what we saw in our output was when I said system.out.print first initial, which wasn't the value which we gave it, it was the variable name, it automatically printed the value we assigned the variable. And that's just the great thing about variables. Rather than writing the same thing, if we wanted h to print like 500 times in a piece of code, what we could do is we could actually maximize our efficiency, and rather than just writing the actual the actual value of h, we could actually use the variable names to write the values instead. And basically what this is also good for is we can easily go ahead and manipulate and change what we do. So we can easily go ahead and manipulate and change the value of first initial. So if I wanted to, I could go back and change first initial to S if I decided that I didn't want first initial to be H anymore. And this way, wherever we put first initial in our code, it will automatically change to S with it, rather than us writing H 100 times, and then if we wanted to change it to S, we would have to change all 100 of those lines back to S. But if we just change the variable name, we could easily have the others change with it, which is really, really useful to us as programmers. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to just go ahead and do that same thing. So basically, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and say, I'm just going to copy and paste this a few times. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print all of these other variables. So I'm just saying I'm going to print student name, I'm going to print grade, I'm going to print score, and I'm going to print pass. So I've just copied and pasted this line over and over again, and I'm just going to change the variable name inside. So let's try printing grade. Let's try printing score. Let's try printing pass. Then we can save this and then we can run it. Let's see what happens. So as you can see, without even typing H10, 80.2 or true when we printed it, we didn't even print those exact values. All I did is I used a print statement to just print the variable name. All I did is I typed the variable name inside the print statement, and it automatically recognized what I was trying to print. So that's a really cool thing about actually being able to use these variables, because as I mentioned previously, if I wanted H to be printed, I could just change this to H, no problem. I could just put this in double quotes and say H. I can just say H. And then I could say I wanted H 3 times. So I can just say this, and just print it 3 times. So, okay, so we have it printed 3 times. So we can just print it 3 times like this. We can run it and it will work. That would be given. However, it just print 3 times like you wanted it to. But say this was more than 3 times, and say that this was 1,000 times, and now we just decided that wasn't working for us. We don't want H to be printed because that's just not what we wanted in our code. We wanted to manipulate some things and change it. So we would have to go back and for all those 1,000 lines, we have to go back and say change it to um, S, S, and only then those 1,000 lines will print S. However, if I just had the variable name inside, um, so if I just put first initial in here, and and then it would print H 3 times, and we can just check that. It prints H 3 times still. But then say that we wanted it to be changed to S. So the only thing we'd have to change is this variable at the top, and automatically all 3 of these would be changed to S without us actually manually having to type in SSS every time, which is really time wasting if we had a lot of lines of code. I guess with 3, we could say it's manageable, it's doable. However, if we had 1,000, as I mentioned previously, that's very difficult, very time consuming, and just not what we want to be spending our time on our code. So essentially, I'm just going to go ahead and run this again and show everyone how it just automatically changes to S without me actually having to type S 1,000 times. All I have to do is I had to change it here and everything else changed. So I hope everyone is able to see the effectiveness and why this is actually so helpful and useful to use variables. So basically, what I did is I've printed all of these. So I'll just go ahead and show this to everyone again, just in case everyone forgot what happened. Um, so now I've just printed those values for the variables. And essentially, what happened is I just printed these, and now all we have is them printed. So it's just them there. We don't really know what they mean though when they print. They're just there. Um, they're just there without any context. So we actually want to be able to change this, and in order to be able to change this, what we're actually going to be able to do is we're going to do something called concatenation, which I'll bring everyone to here and explain what this means. All right. Okay, so, however, as I mentioned right now, what we just did is we just essentially took this right now and we just had our straight values printed on our output, but we didn't have it with any context. So just what we want to do to make it more clear what we're printing is we're going to do something called concatenation. And basically, this is when you can print variables and text together by doing something called concatenating. And that's just when you can just print the variables and text together. So this is done by putting a plus sign in the middle of the variable name as well as the text you want to print. And by doing this, we could easily be able to actually effectively print our output with text and variables. And to make this more clear, I'll show everyone what this looks like. Okay, so essentially we have this over here. So we have our first initial. Let's look at this first. So we know the first initial would be H. So what we're going to do is we're going to say the student's first initial is, and then I'm going to put a plus sign over here. And let's show everyone what this actually looks like. So essentially, what we're going to do is we're just going to be simply saving this, and we're going to be running this. And as you can see, now it says the student's first initial is H. If I go back here, that's what I wrote. So rather than it just saying H over there, we don't really know what H means if we just display it. Of course, we know because we're the ones who wrote the code, but if it was an outside person or someone else looking at your code appear or someone like that who didn't know much about your code and saw the output, they would just see H and they would not know what that meant. So we can actually use this idea of concatenation to be able to actually um, display what we're actually trying to say in our code. So we can say the student's first initial is H. That's what I wrote over here. And I use the plus sign to combine them together. And please do keep in mind, this will not work if you do not use the plus sign. You have to use the plus sign. Like if you just do this, as you can see, there's be a red line underneath. It won't accept this. So you have to separate it with a plus sign, which is the idea of concatenation, which I just explained. So now we can just go ahead and do the same thing. So you can say the student's grade is, um, and we're going to say this. And now we're going to say the student's name is plus, and then we're going to say the, or this would be score, the student's score is, and then we're going to say plus, student's grade is, and then finally, let's say, did the student pass or fail? So the did the student pass or fail? And basically, I'm just going to be doing a plus sign to concatenate. And essentially, all that's happening here is, as you can see, it just using concatenation to combine the actual um, the actual messages and the variable names together. So now I'm just going to be saving that. And we can always manipulate it, do things like adding a space. We can always do things like adding a space between these. We can do many things because as you can see, it says the student score is 80.2 and there's kind of um, no space in the middle. So we can always go back and once we actually display this code, we can always go back and do things to fix this, manipulate this around so we actually ensure that we have kind of the display that we're looking for. So in order to do this, I'm just going to add a space over here between them. So over here, space, and over here, space. So save. And then we're going to run. And then as you can see, it looks a bit better now. And all I've done is I've just used concatenation to be able to display a message along with our variables. So we have the student's first initial is H, the student's grade is 10, the student's score is 80.2, and did the student pass or fail? I said true because the student passed. And then essentially that's all we have to do when it comes to this actual concatenation and message combining with the variables. So as you can see from here, it's actually quite simple and quite easy to be looking at. We can also see if we can re-add that string. So we can say string name is equal to, let's just name it, we named it Home Sherlock. So and essentially, we're just going to, you can do the exact same thing with this as well, in the sense that you can actually just now do system.out.print. The student's name is, we can concatenate that, and you can say plus name. And I'll leave that one to try on your own. If you'd like to do that practice on your own, practice on concatenating this name. And it's just the exact same thing as what we just did, these four things we just did right now. Um, So essentially all that happens is that you're just going to say the message and then you're going to concatenate with the plus and just put the variable name there. So this is really easy to do. All we need to do is we just need to uh, consider the variables, the variable type, which is obviously very important, the data type. Do you want it to be char, int, double, boolean, or string? It depends on what kind of data we're trying to get from our code, what kind of data we're trying to implement. So just depending on that, you can do whatever you would like with the code. You can manipulate it. You can do it on whatever subject you'd like. The great thing about this is it's completely up to you, the programmer, of how you want to go about creating this. So essentially, that's just the main idea over here. That's how we can actually use um, this idea of methods and data in order to actually be able to effectively display proper messages on our code. All right, so moving on. So someone just asked, can this be used to create an app or game or add-on in Google? So definitely. So the great thing about this is obviously with these concepts, the great thing about this is you can actually implement these in any way you'd like. So you can actually use things like data types to expand on it even further and add multiple messages. You can write many lines of code with the data types and variables. And I will tell you that if you'd like to create some kind of app or game or some kind of application, that's what you're looking for. This is really great to kind of solidify these concepts of data types and variables, because variables are something which is very so widely used, especially in things like apps and games, because of the fact that there is so much data that has to be passed on when making these games. So yes, definitely you can use all these concepts in order to create an app or game. So essentially, that's it for today's Java programming lesson. I'd like to thank all participants for attending today. I really hope everyone enjoyed and was able to kind of learn something new and useful about Java programming, whether it be about data and methods, variable types, data types. Just hope everyone was able to take away something from today's lesson. So this is a Java webinar programming series, and so I will be doing a next webinar expanding on these Java concepts and topics which were learned today. And as well, a recording of today's webinar will be provided to all participants. So if you wanted to go back and review something or just kind of clarify something, you can always go back and review that recording. In addition, if you also had any more questions about either today's lesson or about just anything regarding Java programming or coding in general, please do feel free to contact me through my website. And once again, thank you all so much for attending today's session. I really hope I get to see all of you guys again. Hope everyone enjoyed, and thank you. That's all. Thank you for attending and hope to see you in the next Java programming webinar. Thank you and bye. Have a nice day.